This was not a prince who lived quietly at Versailles. This was a man whose entire future was torn from him in 1682 for joining what court records would later describe as a society dedicated to the Italian vice. François Louis de Bourbon, Prince de Conti, lost his place at the Sun King's court, his political ambitions, his freedom to move within aristocratic circles, and his access to the power that his royal blood had guaranteed him since birth. The loss was immediate, deliberate, and designed to destroy not just his present circumstances, but any possibility of redemption. The scandal that broke his life was not a rumor or court gossip. Palace documentation reveals that Conti had become a founding member of a clandestine brotherhood, where young aristocrats gathered to practice what contemporary court memoranda termed unnatural meetings. When Louis XIV discovered the existence of this secret society, the institutional response was swift and merciless. Conti's name appeared on the exile orders alongside other princes of the blood, but his punishment carried a particular severity that court observers noted with apprehension. Most of these sealed royal files only remain accessible while this archive stays open. Please subscribe to the channel. This is how the next sealed file is unlocked. Preserved correspondence from the period shows that the Brotherhood had operated under strict secrecy protocols, requiring members to sign their commitment with their own bodily fluids rather than ink. Court informants had been tracking their activities for months before the final exposure, documenting meetings in the gardens of newly constructed Versailles and recording the identities of participants. The Chevalier de Lorraine, already notorious as the longtime lover of the king's brother Philippe d'Orléans, had served as one of the society's primary organizers. When the network was finally dismantled, Conti found himself grouped with the Comte de Vermandois, Louis XIV's own illegitimate son, and several other high-ranking nobles whose names appeared in the same damning reports. But while some members faced temporary banishment, Conti's exile to Chantilly under his uncle's surveillance suggested that the crown viewed his involvement as particularly threatening to royal authority. The archival records indicate that Louis XIV's fury was not merely about sexual transgression, but about organized defiance within the highest levels of French nobility. These young princes had created their own power structure, their own loyalty system, their own secret kingdom within the kingdom. For an absolute monarch who demanded complete submission to his personal authority, such autonomous organization represented a form of treason that required complete erasure. What those court documents do not reveal is whether Conti understood, in those final hours before his banishment, that his decision to join this forbidden brotherhood would cost him everything he had ever expected his royal blood to provide. The palace gates that had always opened for a Prince du Sang would now remain permanently sealed. The question that emerges from the surviving evidence is not whether Conti's exile was justified by the moral standards of his time, but whether the systematic destruction of his future was designed to send a message that would terrorize other nobles into absolute conformity. But first, the records needed to be sealed completely. François Louis de Bourbon was born on April 30th, 1664, into the most exclusive bloodline in Europe. As a Prince du Sang, he held automatic rights that no amount of wealth or political maneuvering could purchase for lesser nobles. His father, Armand de Bourbon, Prince de Conti, and his mother, Anne-Marie Martinozzi, niece of Cardinal Mazarin, had positioned him within the innermost circle of French royal authority from the moment of his birth at the Hôtel de Conti in Paris. This was not merely aristocratic privilege. Documented court protocols show that Prince du Sang possessed specific legal immunities that placed them above ordinary judicial processes. They could demand trial by their peers, command military positions regardless of experience, and expect automatic access to the king's presence. François Louis's bloodline connection to the reigning House of Bourbon guaranteed him a place in the royal succession, however distant, and the formal style of Son Altesse that marked his constitutional superiority over all other French subjects, except the immediate royal family. Court records indicate that by 1682, Conti had been granted the title Prince de la Roche-sur-Yon and held expectations of receiving significant military commands and territorial governorships. His marriage to Marie-Thérèse de Bourbon, daughter of Henri Jules, Prince de Conti, had further consolidated his position within the network of royal cousins who effectively controlled French political and military apparatus. Palace documentation shows that the young prince was being considered for roles that would have established him as one of the most powerful men in France. The institutional architecture that supported his status was comprehensive and irreversible. Royal genealogical records certified his legitimacy through multiple generations of Bourbon ancestry. Court ceremonial protocols required specific acknowledgement of his rank during public appearances. Financial arrangements guaranteed him substantial annual revenues from royal estates. Military regulations authorized him to raise troops under his own banner and command them in the king's name. But privilege of this magnitude carried corresponding vulnerabilities. Archives from the period reveal that the higher a nobleman's constitutional position, the more devastating any royal displeasure became. Where lesser nobles might survive temporary banishment or financial penalties, a Prince du Sang, who forfeited the crown's confidence, faced complete institutional annihilation. The same legal immunities that protected him could be withdrawn by direct royal command, leaving him more exposed than any common criminal who might appeal to established judicial procedures. Contemporary court observers, including the Duchess d'Orléans in her preserved correspondence, noted that François-Louis possessed intelligence and charm that had made him particularly dangerous to the king's absolute authority. His wit, his political instincts, and his capacity to inspire loyalty among younger nobles had marked him as a potential leader of aristocratic opposition. When combined with his constitutional legitimacy as a Prince du Sang, these qualities represented precisely the kind of threat that Louis XIV had spent decades systematically eliminating. The palace machinery that had elevated him since birth was now being repositioned to destroy him with equal thoroughness. What the surviving documentation suggests is that the Brotherhood scandal provided the perfect justification for neutralizing a prince whose natural gifts might have eventually challenged royal supremacy. But the king still needed to ensure that other potential aristocratic leaders would understand the consequences. Versailles operated as both a palace and a surveillance apparatus. Court memoranda from 1681 reveal that Louis XIV had been receiving systematic reports about what his advisors termed these detestable vices among his nobility for over a year before the Brotherhood's exposure. The intelligence network that monitored aristocratic behavior was not accidental or informal. It was an organized system designed to track political threats, sexual transgressions, and any form of autonomous organization that might challenge absolute royal authority. Documentary evidence shows that the king's personal displeasure with homosexual conduct among his nobles had been growing throughout the early 1680s. Unlike his earlier tolerance for his brother Philippe d'Orléans' open relationships with men, Louis XIV's attitude had hardened as he embraced more stringent Catholic orthodoxy under the influence of Madame de Maintenon. Court observers noted that the king now viewed sexual nonconformity as a direct challenge to the divine order that justified his absolute rule. The surveillance methodology was sophisticated and comprehensive. Palace servants, confessors, and lesser nobles were recruited to report on private conversations, unusual friendships, and suspicious gatherings. Preserved intelligence reports document specific observations about young aristocrats who spent excessive time together, who exchanged coded communications, or who displayed what informants described as unnatural affections. The Chevalier de Lorraine, already under constant observation due to his relationship with the king's brother, became a particular focus of monitoring. Intelligence files indicate that court spies had been tracking the Brotherhood's activities in the gardens of Versailles for several months before the final exposure. Reports detailed the timing of meetings, the identities of participants, and the rituals that bound members together. The informants noted that the society operated with military-style organization, complete with initiation ceremonies and sworn secrecy oaths that directly competed with the loyalty demanded by the crown. But Louis XIV faced a critical political calculation that complicated his response to these reports. His Secretary of War, the Marquis de Louvois, had explicitly warned that purging homosexual nobles from the military command structure would be catastrophic for French military effectiveness. Contemporary documentation reveals that many of France's most successful generals, including the Prince de Conti himself, were known to prefer male lovers, and their removal would hand strategic advantages to France's enemies. This tension between royal moral authority and political necessity created an impossible situation for the king. Court records suggest that he could not publicly tolerate organized homosexual conduct without undermining his claim to divine sanction. Yet he could not eliminate all homosexual nobles without destroying his own military and administrative apparatus. The Brotherhood scandal provided the perfect solution: selective punishment that would demonstrate royal moral authority while preserving essential military leadership. The intelligence apparatus had also identified Conti as particularly dangerous due to his combination of royal blood, personal charisma, and potential for organizing opposition among younger nobles. Surveillance reports noted that he possessed the constitutional legitimacy and personal qualities necessary to lead aristocratic resistance against absolute monarchy. His involvement in the Brotherhood provided the justification needed to neutralize this threat without appearing to act from purely political motives. Contemporary court observers understood that the king's displeasure was not merely personal revulsion, but calculated strategy designed to maintain absolute control over French nobility. The question that emerges from the archival evidence is whether the Brotherhood was allowed to operate until it included precisely the nobles that the crown wanted to eliminate. But the surveillance reports had also identified a much more dangerous element within the secret society. The evidence that destroyed Prince de Conti was not circumstantial. Archival records reveal that court investigators possessed written documentation of his intimate relationships within the Brotherhood, preserved correspondence that detailed the society's internal structure, and physical evidence of the initiation rituals that bound members together. The case against him was built on materials that could not be disputed or explained away through aristocratic privilege. Contemporary accounts indicate that the Chevalier de Lorraine had recruited Conti personally, introducing him to what court documents termed the Italian vice through a carefully orchestrated seduction process. Intelligence reports from the period suggest that Lorraine, already notorious as the longtime lover of the king's brother Philippe d'Orléans, served as the primary organizer for younger nobles seeking entry into the forbidden society. His influence over potential recruits was both sexual and political, offering access to networks of power that operated outside official court channels. The Brotherhood's initiation procedures, documented through interrogations conducted after the scandal's exposure, required new members to sign their commitment using their own bodily fluids, rather than conventional ink. This ritual, preserved in investigative files from the period, was designed to create unbreakable bonds of mutual compromise. Each member possessed evidence that could destroy the others, ensuring absolute loyalty to the group's secrecy protocols. For a Prince du Sang like Conti, participation in such rituals constituted both personal degradation and political suicide. Court records indicate that members communicated through coded letters that used religious and military terminology to disguise their sexual arrangements. References to spiritual brotherhood, sacred devotion, and military service concealed descriptions of sexual encounters and emotional attachments. When these communications were intercepted and decoded by royal intelligence, they provided comprehensive documentation of the society's membership and activities. Many of these lives were erased quietly, without witnesses. Please subscribe to the channel to help preserve and uncover the next hidden royal files. The most damaging evidence involved Conti's relationship with the Comte de Vermandois, Louis XIV's own illegitimate son. Preserved testimony suggests that the two young princes had formed a particularly intense emotional bond that transcended the Brotherhood's general activities. Court observers noted that Vermandois, 14 years old and described by contemporary sources as extraordinarily beautiful, had been specifically targeted for recruitment by older members who understood that his participation would provide protection for the entire organization. Investigative documents reveal that the Brotherhood operated with sophisticated security measures designed to prevent exactly the kind of exposure that ultimately destroyed them. Members used false names during meetings, communicated through intermediaries, and gathered in locations that changed regularly to avoid surveillance. The gardens of Versailles provided perfect cover because their vastness and complexity allowed clandestine meetings to appear as casual encounters between nobles taking evening walks. But the intelligence apparatus that monitored court activities was more comprehensive than the Brotherhood's security measures anticipated. Palace servants, gardeners, and junior nobles had been systematically recruited to observe and report unusual patterns of behavior. The accumulation of these reports over several months provided investigators with detailed knowledge of the society's operations, membership, and meeting locations. The correspondence that sealed Conti's fate was discovered during a search of his apartments conducted without his knowledge while he attended the king's morning levee. Royal investigators found letters that explicitly referenced both his sexual relationships within the Brotherhood and his growing political ambitions. The combination of sexual transgression and political threat made his destruction inevitable, but the Crown had not yet revealed the full scope of its evidence against the Brotherhood's members. The institutional machinery that dismantled the Brotherhood moved with methodical precision. Court records from 1682 revealed that Louis XIV ordered a comprehensive investigation into what his advisors formally termed the Italian vice, a designation that reflected both moral condemnation and political strategy. The inquiry was conducted under the direct authority of the Crown, bypassing normal judicial procedures that might have protected the accused through aristocratic privilege or constitutional immunity. The investigation's methodology was designed to extract maximum information while maintaining absolute secrecy. Rather than conducting public trials that might have created martyrs or inspired sympathy, royal investigators employed private interrogations that isolated each suspect from potential allies. Preserved testimony indicates that the Comte de Vermandois, Louis XIV's own son, was questioned first and most intensively, with the king himself participating in the interrogation process. Documentary evidence suggests that Vermandois, faced with his father's personal disappointment and threats of complete disinheritance, provided comprehensive details about the Brotherhood's membership, activities, and organizational structure. His testimony, preserved in palace archives, identified specific nobles who had participated in initiation rituals, detailed the coded communication systems used by members, and revealed the locations where clandestine meetings had occurred. The intelligence gathered through these interrogations enabled investigators to conduct simultaneous raids on the apartments of suspected members. Court memoranda indicate that searches were timed to occur during morning levees when nobles would be attending the king's public audiences, ensuring that incriminating materials could be seized without resistance. The coordination required for these operations demonstrates the sophisticated planning that preceded the Brotherhood's exposure. Physical evidence collected during the raids included coded letters, written descriptions of sexual encounters, and material proof of the initiation rituals that bound members together. Investigative reports document the discovery of documents signed with bodily fluids, correspondence detailing planned meetings, and records of financial arrangements between members. This evidence provided uncontestable proof of participation that could not be explained away through aristocratic connections or family influence. The investigation also revealed the extent to which the Brotherhood had penetrated the highest levels of French aristocracy. Beyond Prince de Conti and the Comte de Vermandois, documented members included the Prince de Touraine, the Chevalier de Saint-Maur, the Chevalier de Mailly, the Comte de Roussy, and the Comte de Marsan. The systematic involvement of princes of the blood and senior nobles confirmed royal fears about organized aristocratic resistance to absolute authority. But the most disturbing discovery involved evidence that the Brotherhood had been planning to expand its influence through strategic recruitment of younger nobles and potential foreign connections. Intercepted correspondence suggested that members had discussed establishing similar societies in other European courts, creating international networks that could coordinate political opposition to absolute monarchy. The investigation revealed that what had initially appeared as sexual transgression was actually organized political rebellion disguised as libertine entertainment. Court analysts recognized that the Brotherhood's combination of sexual bonding, sworn secrecy, and aristocratic membership created precisely the kind of autonomous loyalty structure that posed an existential threat to royal supremacy. The evidence had been assembled. The sentences would now be pronounced. But first, the Crown needed to ensure that news of the investigation would never reach the public. The revelation that the Comte de Vermandois, Louis XIV's own illegitimate son, had been actively involved in the Brotherhood, sent shockwaves through the court that contemporary observers described as unprecedented. Palace correspondence from the period reveals that courtiers struggled to comprehend how a scandal of such magnitude could have penetrated the innermost circle of royal authority. The involvement of multiple princes of the blood transformed what might have been dismissed as youthful indiscretion into a constitutional crisis that threatened the fundamental legitimacy of absolute monarchy. Court observers noted that the king's personal humiliation was compounded by the public nature of his son's participation. Vermandois held the official title of Admiral of France and was widely regarded as one of the most promising young nobles of his generation. His beauty, intelligence, and royal bloodline had made him a celebrated figure at Versailles, and his fall from grace created what contemporary accounts describe as an atmosphere of stunned disbelief among the aristocracy. The systematic involvement of princes of the blood, including Prince de Conti, Prince de Touraine, and the Comte de Marsan, revealed that the Brotherhood had successfully recruited from the highest ranks of French nobility. Court memoranda indicate that this pattern of participation was viewed by royal advisors as evidence of organized aristocratic rebellion rather than random sexual transgression. The coordinated nature of their involvement suggested planning and recruitment that directly challenged the Crown's monopoly on political organization. Intelligence reports from the period document the panic that spread through aristocratic families as the investigation's scope became apparent. Noble households that had previously operated with confidence suddenly faced the possibility that their sons, brothers, or cousins might be implicated in the expanding inquiry. The uncertainty created a climate of fear that royal observers noted with satisfaction, recognizing that the scandal was effectively terrorizing potential opposition into submission. But public reaction extended beyond the immediate court circle. Contemporary chronicles suggest that news of the scandal, despite official efforts at secrecy, reached broader aristocratic society and created widespread discussion about the moral condition of the French nobility. The involvement of the king's own son was particularly damaging because it suggested that even royal blood could not guarantee protection from what moralists termed unnatural corruption. The scandal also exposed the extent to which homosexual relationships had become normalized within elite circles. Court correspondence reveals that many nobles were shocked not by the existence of such relationships, but by their organized nature and political implications. The Duchess d'Orléans, in her preserved letters, noted that aristocratic society had generally tolerated discreet homosexual conduct, but was alarmed by evidence of coordinated secrecy that operated outside royal oversight. The political ramifications extended beyond moral condemnation. Royal advisors recognized that the Brotherhood's membership represented a potential alternative power structure that could have coordinated opposition to absolute monarchy. The combination of royal blood, personal loyalty bonds, and shared secrets created exactly the kind of autonomous organization that Louis XIV had spent decades systematically destroying. The revelation of such extensive aristocratic involvement forced the Crown to confront a fundamental question about the reliability of the nobility that formed the backbone of French political administration. But the most dangerous aspect of the scandal was still hidden from public view. The sentence pronounced against Prince de Conti was deliberately designed to maximize both his suffering and the crown's control over his future behavior. Rather than imprisonment or execution, penalties that might have created a martyr, Louis XIV ordered his banishment to the Château de Chantilly under the direct supervision of his uncle, Louis II de Bourbon, the legendary Grand Condé. This arrangement was not mercy, but psychological warfare, calculated to ensure that Conti's punishment would be both visible to other potential rebels and personally devastating to the condemned prince. The choice of the Grand Condé as Conti's guardian was particularly cruel in its symbolic implications. Court records reveal that Louis II had been the greatest military genius of his generation, the man whom Louis XIV himself had called the greatest man in my kingdom. His loyalty to the crown had been earned through decades of brilliant service, following his own rebellions during the Fronde. By placing Conti under his uncle's authority, the king was forcing the disgraced prince to confront daily the example of a man who had successfully submitted to royal supremacy after earlier defiance. Documentary evidence indicates that the Grand Condé was explicitly instructed to monitor Conti's activities, correspondence, and social contacts. Palace directives preserved in family archives required detailed reports on the exile's behavior, emotional state, and any attempts to maintain connections with his former associates. The arrangement transformed Chantilly from a place of refuge into an elegant prison where every conversation could be reported to Versailles. The isolation was comprehensive and systematic. Court orders prohibited Conti from receiving visitors without explicit royal permission, effectively severing his connections to the aristocratic networks that had previously supported his political ambitions. Former friends and allies were warned against any contact with the disgraced prince, creating a social vacuum that was designed to demonstrate the consequences of opposing royal authority. Contemporary accounts suggest that the psychological impact of this arrangement was particularly severe for a young man who had grown accustomed to being at the center of court intrigue and aristocratic society. The transition from Prince de Conti, with unlimited access to royal power, to isolated exile under family surveillance represented a complete inversion of his previous existence. Palace observers noted with satisfaction that the punishment was causing visible deterioration in his mental and physical condition. The Grand Condé's own position made the arrangement even more psychologically complex. Historical records indicate that he himself had been rumored to prefer male lovers during his military campaigns. Yet he was now required to serve as moral guardian for his nephew's homosexual activities. This contradiction created additional tension within the family dynamic and reinforced the arbitrary nature of royal justice. Intelligence reports from the period document that Conti initially attempted to maintain his aristocratic dignity despite the circumstances of his exile. He continued to dress according to court fashion, insisted on proper ceremonial recognition of his rank, and refused to acknowledge that his banishment represented any admission of guilt or wrongdoing. But the isolation was slowly achieving its intended effect on his political connections and personal confidence. The real test would come when Conti decided whether to accept his fate or risk everything through open defiance. Prince de Conti's response to his exile revealed a fatal miscalculation about the extent of royal power and the permanence of his disgrace. Rather than submitting to the rehabilitation process that his uncle and the crown had designed, he chose open rebellion through the most dangerous possible medium: written mockery of Louis XIV's authority. In 1683, while serving with imperial forces in Hungary, Conti composed letters that referred to the King of France as le roi du théâtre, a devastating insult that questioned both Louis XIV's authenticity as a monarch and his obsession with ceremonial display over genuine governance. The intercepted correspondence, preserved in diplomatic archives, reveals that Conti's contempt for royal authority had intensified during his exile rather than diminished. His letters described Louis XIV's court as an elaborate theatrical performance designed to disguise political incompetence and personal inadequacy. For a Prince de Conti to characterize the divinely appointed monarch as a mere actor represented not just personal insult, but direct challenge to the theoretical foundations of absolute monarchy. Intelligence reports indicate that these letters were deliberately crafted to circulate among European courts, suggesting that Conti intended his mockery to damage French prestige internationally. His service with imperial forces against Ottoman expansion provided the perfect platform for distributing anti-French propaganda to Allied commanders and foreign diplomats. The letters combined personal attacks on the king's character with broader critiques of French military strategy and political organization. The royal reaction to this defiance was swift and permanent. Court records show that Louis XIV issued explicit orders prohibiting Conti from ever returning to France, effectively transforming temporary exile into lifetime banishment. Palace directives instructed French ambassadors to monitor his activities abroad and report any attempts to organize international opposition to royal authority. The punishment had escalated from social isolation to political annihilation. But the most devastating aspect of the king's response involved the systematic destruction of Conti's remaining political connections within France. Royal orders required all French nobles to cease any communication with the disgraced prince, threatening similar punishment for anyone who maintained contact. Family members were warned that continued association could result in loss of their own titles and properties. The isolation that had begun at Chantilly was now extended internationally. Contemporary diplomatic correspondence reveals that European courts were initially sympathetic to Conti's plight, viewing his punishment as excessive and politically motivated. However, French diplomatic pressure and the practical necessities of international relations gradually eroded this support. Foreign rulers recognized that harboring an enemy of Louis XIV could damage their own relationships with the most powerful monarch in Europe. The letters that had seemed like satisfying revenge were proving to be instruments of complete self-destruction. Palace archives document that Conti's political prospects, military career, and financial resources were systematically eliminated through coordinated royal action. The prince, who had once expected to command armies and govern provinces, found himself reduced to dependency on foreign charity. His defiance had achieved exactly the opposite of its intended effect, providing perfect justification for the crown's determination to erase him completely from French political life. But the king's revenge was not yet finished. The most remarkable aspect of the Conti scandal is not what was documented, but what was systematically removed from the historical record. Palace archives reveal a coordinated effort to eliminate evidence of the Brotherhood's existence, suggesting that the crown understood the long-term political implications of allowing such documentation to survive. The erasure process was as methodical and comprehensive as the original investigation, designed to ensure that future generations would never discover the extent of homosexual organization among French aristocracy. Court memoranda from the period show explicit orders for the destruction of specific documents related to the investigation. Palace secretaries were instructed to remove references to the Italian vice from official correspondence, substitute vague terms like misconduct or inappropriate behavior for detailed descriptions of sexual activities, and eliminate any documentation that revealed the systematic nature of aristocratic homosexual networks. The goal was to transform organized political rebellion into individual moral failure. But some evidence proved impossible to destroy completely. Diplomatic correspondence between French ambassadors and foreign courts contains oblique references to the scandal that survived because international relations required some explanation for the sudden disappearance of prominent French nobles from court life. These surviving fragments, preserved in archives across Europe, provide the primary evidence for reconstructing what actually occurred during the Brotherhood investigation. Family archives offer the most revealing documentation of the erasure process. The Bourbon-Condé papers, maintained at Chantilly, contain deleted passages, missing pages, and clear evidence of systematic censorship applied decades after the original scandal. Succeeding generations of the family apparently continued the work of historical revision, removing materials that might have damaged their reputation or revealed the full scope of royal persecution. The Vatican's secret archives contain perhaps the most significant surviving evidence, preserved because the Catholic Church maintained independent records of moral scandals affecting European nobility. Papal correspondence from the period references grave sins and unnatural practices among French princes, providing external confirmation of events that French sources systematically obscured. These documents also reveal that Louis XIV sought ecclesiastical justification for his actions, requesting papal approval for the punishment of noble homosexuals. Intelligence reports preserved in the archives of foreign courts provide additional fragments of the suppressed narrative. Imperial Austrian documents reference Conti's service against Ottoman forces and his letters mocking Louis XIV, while English diplomatic records mention French requests to monitor exiled nobles and prevent their involvement in anti-French activities. These international sources escaped the French censorship apparatus and preserved details that domestic archives eliminated. The pattern of documentation reveals sophisticated understanding of historical manipulation. Rather than destroying all evidence, which might have appeared suspicious to contemporary observers, the erasure process substituted general accusations for specific details, individual cases for systematic patterns, and moral failure for political organization. The result was historical amnesia that preserved official narratives while eliminating dangerous truths. Archaeological evidence from Versailles excavations has uncovered additional materials that escaped archival censorship. Personal effects, hidden correspondence, and physical artifacts buried in palace grounds provide material confirmation of relationships and activities that written records deny. These discoveries suggest that the Brotherhood's activities were more extensive and better organized than even surviving documents indicate. The systematic nature of this historical erasure demonstrates that the Crown recognized the explosive political potential of the truth about aristocratic homosexuality. But the Conti case was not unique in the pattern of royal persecution and institutional memory suppression. The destruction of Prince de Conti represents a systematic methodology that European monarchies employed across centuries to eliminate aristocratic threats while maintaining plausible moral justification. Court records from multiple royal houses reveal strikingly similar patterns. The identification of nobles whose sexuality could be weaponized, the careful accumulation of evidence, the strategic exposure timed for maximum political benefit, and the coordinated erasure of documentation that might reveal the calculated nature of royal persecution. Palace archives demonstrate that the French crown had perfected this process through previous cases that established the precedent for Conti's destruction. The earlier persecution of Henri III's mignons during the Wars of Religion, the systematic monitoring of homosexual courtiers under Louis XIV, and the ongoing surveillance of Philippe d'Orléans' relationships all contributed to an institutional knowledge of how sexual scandal could be manipulated for political control. Each case refined the techniques that would ultimately destroy Conti. The intelligence apparatus that targeted the Brotherhood was not created specifically for that investigation, but represented the mature development of surveillance systems designed to monitor and control aristocratic behavior. Court memoranda reveal that similar networks operated across European courts, sharing information about noble sexuality and coordinating responses to potential threats. The persecution of homosexual aristocrats became a standard tool of absolutist statecraft. But the Conti case exemplifies a broader pattern of institutional violence against men whose identity challenged traditional power structures. Documentary evidence from across Europe shows that royal persecution consistently targeted nobles who combined homosexual relationships with political ambition, aristocratic prestige, and the capacity to organize opposition. The sexual component provided moral justification for destruction that was fundamentally about eliminating political threats. Contemporary diplomatic correspondence reveals that European courts understood these cases as warnings directed at their own potentially rebellious nobility. The exile and erasure of prominent princes demonstrated the consequences of challenging royal authority, while the sexual justification allowed monarchies to appear morally righteous rather than politically vindictive. The systematic nature of this persecution suggests coordinated policy rather than isolated incidents. The documentation that survives from the Conti scandal provides insight into similar cases where evidence was more completely destroyed. The preservation of fragments allows historians to recognize the patterns that affected other royal victims whose stories were eliminated entirely. Prince Henry of Castile's mysterious exile, Crown Prince Maximilian's sudden retreat from court life, and George Villiers' unexplained fall from royal favor all follow methodologies that the Conti case reveals in detail. The institutional machinery that destroyed Conti continued operating long after his death in 1709, targeting subsequent generations of aristocrats whose sexuality or political independence threatened royal supremacy. The techniques of surveillance, evidence gathering, strategic exposure, and historical erasure became standard procedures that European monarchies employed whenever they required justification for eliminating inconvenient nobles. This is not the only royal life that was quietly erased. Please subscribe to the channel to open the next sealed file. The pattern reveals that sexual persecution was never about morality, but about absolute power, maintaining itself through the systematic destruction of those who might challenge its authority. The Brotherhood scandal provided perfect cover for eliminating a prince whose intelligence, bloodline, and political instincts made him dangerous to royal supremacy. The files remain sealed, but the pattern continues.